Hey, welcome back to the channel. Andrew at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas. Not the typical kind of thing we have on the bench today, but there's a little bit of an interesting history behind these guns, the whole family of guns that these spawned. This is the Raven P25 and 25 Auto. And I know a lot of you are doing a double take. Why in the world is he talking about a Raven P25? And valid question, but not because the gun is of any kind of inherent quality or anything like that. But to be honest with you, currently there's a little bit of a niche collectability in the whole ring of fire guns. We'll talk about what that means in just a second, but a little bit of history behind this gun, this little 25 Auto pistol. It goes back to the Gun Control Act of 1968, one of the most, probably the most sweeping gun legislation bills ever in American history. And it established import, among other things, it established import restrictions on guns from out of the country. So prior to 1969 or October 68, when that went into effect, there were all manner of European semi-auto pistols available on the U.S. market at a relatively low cost. Various Spanish makers like Astra, and then some other smaller, like Buffalo. There was a lot of smaller guns out there. There are some good quality guns from Browning and from Bernardelli that were no longer importable after the restrictions imposed by the Gun Control Act of '68. So just with that passage or that implementation of that piece of legislation, a huge market in small, concealable pocket guns just kind of went away. And especially in the lower cost market, right? So there just weren't any U.S.-made guns of any. I mean, there were still some Colt 25s hanging around, but Colt wasn't making their original 1908 model anymore by that time. They'd outsourced that to Astra as the Astra Cub, and now they couldn't import that because of the Gun Control Act. And it would be a little bit before companies like Firearms International and FIE, Firearms Import and Export, down in Florida, to start producing the European-based guns, or at least the frames in the U.S., put them together. So there was a void. And a man named George Jennings out in California was a machine shop guy, had a machine shop and subcontracting parts for the aerospace industry and just doing machine shop things. Saw that hole in the market, if you will. So designed and implemented a low-cost 25 automatic pistol that they call the Raven, and that's what this is. Introduced in 1970. The P25, it was produced initially in Baldwin Park, California. And it went through several iterations. There's, I think, at least 3, if not 4. We'll call it 4 different variations of this model. The P25, which was the original one, and then later the MP25. So this is a second variation, if you will. I don't know of any collector source on these guns that break it down into this iteration was made for this many years in this place. And a lot of those records are lost to time because the Raven factory, the original factory, the George Jennings facility, burned down in 1991. So let's clear this thing first. Doesn't even want to come off the peg. So the heel release magazine, 6-round magazine on the gun. There is no magazine hold open at all. The magazine, or the slide will close even on the last round. So we're empty, right? So we see the marking here, Raven Arms. I don't know if you can get a good shot of that, but Raven Arms, and then Baldwin Park, California underneath. There are 3 different finishes offered. This is the brushed chrome finish. There was a bright, or brushed nickel, there was a bright chrome finish, and then there was a black finish. You really can't say blued because this isn't steel. This is a zinc aluminum alloy on the frame and slide, so you can't blue it, but it was coated with a black finish, some type of paint, and this is plating. So, and then grips were this walnut style grip, and then there were some fake mother of pearl grips, and there are a few different grip styles offered. So how we differentiate or how the different variations, I guess, can be differentiated is in this safety. The very first safety was a sliding forward to rear horizontal safety, but it was much bigger. It was a big button that moved left to right. And then they went to this sliding style, very thin, small safety that still moved left to right. At some point, they changed these slide serrations here to a much narrower, more I don't want to say 1911-ish, but narrower, sharper slide serrations, and it became the MP25. They moved out of Baldwin Park, went to Ontario, California, went to a few other places. So during that time, George Jennings, the entire rest of his family and all of his associates were put or assisted into going into the gun business with similar models. George's son, Bruce Jennings, founded Jennings Firearms. And if you follow the Jennings Firearms line through Brico Firearms and all the way to Jimenez Firearms, that whole line of progression. The Jennings line, or the Raven line, in 1991, after the factory burned down, George has since died. But a group of his grandkids and other associated relatives formed Phoenix Arms, the Phoenix coming out of the ashes, and they produced a model called the Raven as well, currently on into the 2000s. So, and you can throw in there George's daughter Gail and her husband, I forget if her husband was Jim Davis or John Davis, but there were two brothers, Davis Industries and then Sedco and then Cobra, which became Bearman Industries, which still make the what were the Cobra Derringers today. So there, I mean, there is it's almost like some warped version of the Book of Genesis, because this company begat this company begat this company begat this company, and it just kept going and going and going. And that's where I guess it was a documentary by Frontline on PBS that dubbed these group of companies in the California, Utah, Nevada region as the Ring of Fire companies. And at one time, Lorcan, which is one of the associated companies, was the largest pistol manufacturer in the United States, making over 900,000 guns a year, I think is what the number came out to be. But on the Raven itself, millions of these guns were produced, well over 1 million in the P25, and then another 2 or 3 million at least in the MP25. I don't know that there's a hard and fast number. Those records have been lost to time, and I don't think anybody really cares to resurrect those, to be honest with you. But all throughout this time, there's ATF involvement and people selling guns out the back door of the factory. There's Bruce Jennings getting indicted by a felony and having to sell off his company and then creating a distributorship. I mean, there's all manner of reading out there that you can do on these guns that doesn't mean the guns are worth a hoot, to be honest with you, but the guns are still out there, and you do run across them, and they're still out there in use. So let's take a little deeper look at the mechanics of this gun and see what's good and what's not good. So as we talked about, 25 auto, 6 rounds in the mag. I'm not a huge fan of carrying these with a round in the chamber. There's really, I mean, yes, it's got a safety. The safety only blocks the trigger, and we'll take a look at the sear in just a second. It blocks the sear from going down in the back, but still probably not the best bet on this little gun. Zinc alloy, it's a zinc magnesium alloy called Zamac. That is what the bulk of this gun is made from. Very little steel in this gun. So melting temperature is low on that alloy, somewhere below 800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's just not a gun that you would buy for a daily shooter. But that was never the intention. The intention of this gun, and even members of various firearms group, as various politicians and government agencies tried to ban the production of this gun, other groups stood up and said, hey, if you don't allow people that can't afford a Smith & Wesson or can't afford a insert brand name here, then you're discriminating against these people based on their ability to pay for an expensive handgun. So, I mean, it was a big political issue too. So there's a lot of interesting history well beyond the collectability or the usability of the particular gun. So that said, let's field strip this gun real quick. It's a simple blowback operated gun. There's no locking mechanism or anything in the barrel. It's strictly the weight of the slide and the recoil spring that allows this gun to function well. So there's a firing pin retainer in the back here. So once you've cleared the gun like we did, we're going to pull this back a little bit, and we're going to use a pin here to do this. We're going to push this retainer into the gun. Might should have used a punch. Are we cocked? Yep. Okay, there we go. Now we cocked again. There it is. So you push that retainer in while you pull the slide back slightly, lift up on the rear, and that will allow everything to come off the front. So the barrel is sleeved. It's a steel barrel that's sleeved into this Zamac outer sleeve here, and the slide rides alongside that. So in here, if we remove the firing pin spring, and the retainer, that's how it looks like inside the gun right there. And one of the bad things about this is that the firing pin also serves as the ejector. So when the slide reaches its rearward point of travel, the tip of the firing pin comes through the breech face and actually acts as the ejector, knocking the fired case out of the ejection port. So that puts a lot of stress on this guy. And I remember I was associated with a shop way back in the late 80s when these guns were still in production as the MP25. They would buy these guns by the case. I think our cost was like $32 per unit. But we would buy an equal amount of firing pins. So they break quite a bit. So if you were evaluating one of these and you wanted to see if it was a shooter, that'd be the first thing to look at, is whether that tip is still there. You'll find a lot of times people will have this backwards in the gun. It's somewhat difficult to put together like that, but it is possible. But the gun won't function that way. So that's the correct orientation of that gun there. Another issue is this magazine is not particularly robust, this wire spring that's in the magazine. These magazines, however, are being remade, but they're not expensive. They're not inexpensive. The cost of one of these new magazines now is about $40, which can pretty much top out the cost of the gun, to be honest with you. In good shape, these guns can retail for around the $100 mark. So, and you can find them cheaper than that. Some people ask more than that, but I doubt they ever get it. So let's move this recoil spring out of the way. I don't think these guns ever get shot enough to wear that out, but it could happen. Also, it's relatively mild steel. It's not the best material, so that can definitely rust. So be wary of any recoil spring that shows active rust on it that needs to be replaced. And those are available from various sources. I wouldn't buy one used. They're being remade new. So this is what I was talking about with the safety. This item right here, that's the sear, and it directly impinges upon the firing pin like this when it's in the gun. So that's holding the firing pin back, and then when you pull the trigger, arm on the trigger pushes against this cam, which pivots here and pulls that sear down, allowing the firing pin to go forward. So if this grip is loose, that can pop out of alignment and not fire. So the right grip panel is also important on this gun. So that said, when you move the safety back into the safe position, it comes directly underneath that bar or that pin on the sear, preventing the sear to be pulled downward. So that's the sum total of the safety on the gun. It directly blocks the sear. And it's only detented by this ball, this little detent ball that is halfway staked into that Zamac part of the slide. So the later variations of it, the last variations of the gun, did away with the sliding safety completely and has a rotating disc safety back here that when you push the safety in the up position, a ledge comes and blocks that sear bar, just like the sliding safety does here. So that's how the gun works. And a variation of that, or a form of that, is found in just about all of the George Jennings offspring companies, whether it's Jimenez Arms, Sedco Arms, Brico stuff. The Brico stuff mainly have the flip safety, and then the Jimenez Arms later on. And Jimenez is a whole nother story. When Jennings finally got sued out of business, or ATF started to take them out of business because of people selling stuff out the back door, the shop foreman, a man by the name of Jimenez, somehow cobbled together $510,000 to buy the tooling and work in progress, and opened Jimenez Arms in Nevada. I think Nevada, pretty sure Nevada. And then when they got sideways with ATF, they tried to reopen as JA Enterprises, and finally ATF had said, oh, enough's enough, you're not getting a license again. And that was the death of that. So, but that said, some of those companies, or some of the offspring companies, still live on in Phoenix Arms, and then again in Bearman Industries. Now, I don't know if Bearman has any family association with any of the George Jennings offsprings or ex-wives or any of the other bunch that was involved with these little guns, but I truly don't. That said, we don't carry them at the shop. Anyway, so the extractor on this gun also serves, believe it or not, as a loaded chamber indicator right here on the top of the slide, so you can actually feel it. So it's a pretty cheap gun, but has a loaded chamber indicator. And I mean, you still see them. You still see them around. I don't know of any gun shops that really look for them. And the only way we end up carrying is if we have to buy one as part of a group of guns. When we buy a group of guns, we don't say, yeah, we'll buy all these except for that one. We'll usually take the good with the bad. And we typically don't sell these over the counter. We might put them on Gunbroker or something. Or we've actually got one of my guys, one of my shift managers at the store, likes them for some ungodly reason, and he'll buy them. I don't know how many of them he's got now. He's probably got a pretty good collection of them. So collectability, right? It all depends on the person. So there are some unique variants of this gun. You can, the MP25 and the P25, the different safeties, the different grips, the different finishes. There's a little bit of a difference of guns that you can amass and say, here's my Raven collection. I don't know how many people would appreciate that, but it's still interesting. It's still valid. It's still a viable thing to do. And then there's enough interesting history behind it. You don't have to buy them to shoot them. You can just buy them as, hey, this is an interesting part of U.S. firearms history, and because of what Congress did with the 1968 Gun Control Act, if it hadn't been for that, this gun probably would have never come along. We would still have baby Brownings. We would still have Bernardelli vest pockets. We would still have all of those interesting, cool little 25s that can no longer be imported to this day. They can't be imported from FN or any of the, or Beretta. Beretta started making their guns in the U.S. because of that. So, in any event, the Raven P25. I told a few people that I promised that we'd do one on the Raven. It's just a matter of getting a hold of one, and we did. So if you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell, notify you when we post new videos. We try to do at least one a week, sometimes more, depending on what we get in. If there's a particular make model you want us to take a look at, please drop it in the comments. We read those, and if we can get a hold of them, we will. We absolutely will. So thanks again for stopping by the channel, guys, and see you next time.